Hello there, you beautiful people. My name is Willow, and today I am joined by Nine2 and Special Bread, the head developers, the leaders of the Sanctuary project for all intents and purposes. And of course, today we're going to be asking them some questions. Let's go ahead and let them introduce themselves, starting with Bread. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful today. It's good morning in the UK, expertly cloudy weather, and we're doing fine. Project's going great too. If anyone hasn't heard, I'm working on a new RTS called Sanctuary. Yeah, no, it's all good. I think like every week we see something new come out. This week I was just reviewing the aiming code. Last week we were looking at new maps. It's really coming along super fast. I'm doing great. How are you doing, Nine?
I'm doing well, thank you very much, Brent, and thank you, Willow. Um, yeah, so I'm nine. Guess I do a bit of work on the project. I do some programming, but also a whole bunch of strategy, working out how to go live with this project, who to hire, that type of stuff. And it's cloudy here as well. Interesting, and it's daylight here as well, which is pretty interesting because I'm pretty sure I'm on the other side of the world from you. But anyway,
Oh yeah, it's
there
it's
you
a
have it.
casual 2:40 a.m. for me, and let's get into our first question, which is will Sanctuary have a campaign?
So the answer to that is it's up to you. And the reason why is because what we're doing is we have this kind of development structure where we make sure that we focus on the core game first. So we call that sort of a minimum viable product. And then we'll get it as far as we can out of the gate after that. And that depends on how successful we are. So uh, in short, the way it works is our core thing does not have a campaign, but we do want a campaign, and we're thinking about some campaign missions and how to do the tech, and we're having these conversations now. Although we're focusing on the core aspects of the game first, which is how do you get thousands of tanks to shoot each other? How do you do this? How do you do that? So, because the thing is, with a campaign, you can add it afterwards. Faf has shown that, right? We got Speed on our team who's made a whole campaign for FAF after the fact that it was released. So we could release that after the release of the game, but we can't release the core game after the release of the game. That just doesn't make any sense. So the answer is it's up to you. Make the project successful, and we'll have a bigger and better campaign than you've ever seen. Because we've actually got some pretty good experience with campaign making. There's some stuff if you guys, shameless plug, check out the Nomads campaign. That's got some, you can actually change the way you play some of the missions. There's in-game choices that you can make, and the mission just goes off the rails and it does its own thing. You're like, yeah, I don't want to do this. Let's just nuke them, and then you can do that. It's great. So there's some interesting things going on, and we've actually got some pretty cool ideas that we could do. So other like I was just watching some kind of other casts of other games, and they're like, oh, we're really going to innovate. We're going to put in a co-op campaign, and I'm thinking, yeah, we've seen that one before. We can do co-op campaigns, right? So our actually, I'm just sort of comparing ourselves to some other titles. Like we're actually the stuff we're thinking about is really super advanced. It's like top notch, and it sounds like it's going to be harder, but actually we've done it before, and it's a similar amount of work to just making a normal mission. So that will be the best campaign ever if we're successful. So if there's any investors out there, this project has been so good because of our current investors who are wonderful people. But if you're watching this and you're interested in getting some shares of the company and things like that, we're a proper company and all the rest of it. You can reach out to us and make sure that there is a campaign. It's not actually that expensive if you're a well-seasoned gentleman with a good cash portfolio. It's like campaigns aren't millions of bucks. You
Yeah.
could you could make it happen.
Yeah.
And
So I think the super short answer is that, well, it's probably not going to be that short. But when we started the project, we thought, do we want to do a one-player game or do we want to do a multiplayer game, like a skirmish thing or a campaign? And we decided the multiplayer one because that's what we love as players. Economically, it's probably better to do the other one because it's actually way easier to deliver a game without multiplayer. But also we found out from analyzing stats that like more than 60% of games are actually one-player games. So, in terms of just like pure sales, maybe this isn't you get less sales and the costs are higher. So doing a campaign was probably the right thing to do. Having said that, we're not making this game for money. We're making it for love, and we love multiplayer and everything that goes into 1v1 games, 5v5 games, all that stuff. That's all good stuff, and that's what we wanted to do. And so because of budgetary reasons, we just could do one or the other. We picked the multiplayer. Brett saying it's like up to you. What he means is, in the Kickstarter, the campaign will be a stretch goal. If we reach the stretch goal, we'll have a killer campaign. Maybe there'll be like a minimum campaign and a super awesome campaign, depending on how much money we have. Like there's all sorts of ideas. Maybe like choices. Maybe depending on what you did in this mission, it changes something in a later mission. We also have this really cool idea about how the campaigns don't run at the same time. They're sort of like after each other, because in RTS it always annoys me. You have the beginner level 1 campaign as like the first faction, and the second faction you have the beginner campaign again. It's kind of annoying. We have some cool ideas of how to do that if they're like sequential after each other. You still have to reset the tech back to like the first tech level and take away all the research, but you can just make it way harder. So in the first faction's first campaign, you have the lowest class of tanks, but in the second faction's first level, you have the lowest class of tanks, but it's way harder. And in the third faction's first level, it's just super hard with ramping up the difficulty. I think that's just like way more interesting, and we can do a lot with it, and you can do some very cool things with the plot as well.
All right, thank you for that. And of course, this video is going out pre-Kickstarter, but the moment that Kickstarter happens, I will of course throw a link into the description. So if you're watching this far in the future, or maybe not that far, I don't know the exact, I don't know if there's a date listed for Kickstarter yet. But if the Kickstarter is running, there will be a link in the description, and I will try and there'll definitely be a video going out whenever there's Kickstarter is going off. Moving on to the next question. It is... I worded this all weird. Moving on to the next question. Was the Sanctuary trailer actual gameplay or a scripted scene in engine? And this is referring to the I think there's 2 trailers, so I'll let you all explain both trailers.
Yeah. So in the Steam page, I'm assuming this question is about the Steam trailers, so we have 2. Trailers, and the way that works is we have one cinematic trailer which was fully rendered outside of the game. That was the first one that's on the front page of Steam, and then the second trailer is the gameplay trailer, and that was fully rendered inside Unity, which is the game engine that we use to make the game. And the way it works is the answer is it's kind of a bit of both. Because what happens is we have this system where we have the we have a preview tool, like a little replay preview tool thing that we have internally in the game, and we made that, and we've got all the units and we simulate the sort of projectiles and stuff. But that's sort of a preview proofing tool that we use to make sure that our render is working correctly, our VFX are working correctly, our tanks are looking right, and all the rest of it. So we've rendered it in that, and the reason why is quite simple. Actually, we got some great camera controls in there, so you could just stick them in. And then what we do is those same models, all the assets, we have like an internal build system, which we then deploy to our engine. And then that is the higher performance version of it. So we actually have this kind of interesting internal development system going on. And the reason why we do that is so that the artists can work at full speed while the engine guys can also work at full speed. So the answer is it's kind of like the trailer was basically, well, I mean, you had to set up all the cameras and things like that, we had like all the shots and things. So some of that was scripted, but what we did is we just basically spawned piles of units. And then they had like some little script commands to make them move, and then they just shot at whatever the closest thing was, kind of like normal units do. And then we just sort of looked at all the, we set up like this whole map, and you basically had essentially a giant replay that was happening. And then that's kind of the secret sauce behind it. And then we just took cool shots. You just spawn a pile of tanks, you move them into the base, and then they run in and run over everything, and then they all start shooting each other and fighting and exploding.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like scripted move commands and stuff. These units will spawn here at this time and move that way. And then after that, the engine takes over. They all rotate their turrets. They target each other according to like all the blueprints and all the targeting code. They're aiming and leading targets. So, if you're moving that way and accelerating, they shoot in front of you so that they'll hit you. And it takes into account the height and, lobbing and ballistic arcs and all that sort of stuff. So, it's the proper code is running the simulation, but the way that the units are created in the first place, like we don't click on the factory and say build these 6 units and then go send them here. We just say magic up these units and send them there, and that just makes for reliable camera work. So you can where they're going to be. You spawn the camera and then you move it from here and pan over here, and you know where the units are going to be at the right time.
That is really cool. I actually thought it was more scripted than it was. And I have to give kudos because I was looking at specifically the scene where the amphibious units are coming off the beach, making like a beachhead landing. And I was like, oh yeah, that's probably fully scripted.
I
like,
don't
even the
remember that
shooting.
scene in the gameplay trailer.
Oh, I thought you were talking
Yeah,
about the
I think you're
cinematic.
talking about the no, the cinematic one is
Yeah, the
like
cinematic
rendering
trailer was
stuff.
rendered outside of the game, yeah? So there's
Yeah.
two trailers,
Okay.
right? The cinematic one was rendered in Blender. We had our artists. We just ported the same models. We took all the models that we had in the game. We stuck them into Blender. We had to add some more things. So, like all the volumetric clouds at the start of the game, at the start of the thing. And, but like a lot of the models themselves, like all the tanks driving around, we just stuck them in from whatever we had in the game. So, the shaders are different in Blender. It's got like it's ray traced, whereas Unity is not ray traced, so we have some different lighting things, but the models are the same. But yeah, so that was rendered outside. Right?
Okay.
The gameplay trailer was this giant replay, and we had like 5 battles going on at once, and then you take shots from one of them, then you take shots from another one of them, then you just hit the play button again, it resets everything, then you just make more shots. It was pretty great.
Yeah, sorry, I got a little confused there. My bad.
No worries.
But I appreciate that answer. And moving on, the next question is: how many tech levels will be in the game?
3 plus. It's a hard question because it's 3 plus. It's definitely so we have 3, which are definitely we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 units, which are like fully fledged tiers, like everything else, and then we have more. So it's more than 3. So we have tier 4 units, which are like these giant things. You've seen them in the PA, TA, subcom style games. You know what they are, right? Like Fat Boy and things like that. There's just like the size of a building. But then the other thing is we're also thinking about having the even bigger units potentially. No? Or was that a secret, Nine?
That's a secret, yeah.
Right, I thought okay.
Making things bigger is the secret of all RTS. If it's not bigger, then why even bother?
Well, if you think about it, in other games, they have like the so-called game enders that don't actually end the game. And the game still drags out, and then each team has 50 game enders, and they're all just staring at each other. So there could be a different level above that, which is an actual game ender. But we've got more to announce about that later.
All right. Next question is going to be: will the game have scaling issues with larger units like in Planetary Annihilation or Beyond All Reason, where the biggest units feel a bit too big for the map? For example, in Beyond All Reason, whenever you build a Juggernaut, it really doesn't feel like it's really part of the same game for me sometimes whenever you're looking at it, because it's just so much larger, and in compared to the map, it's just so big for the maps it's placed in.
Yeah, so this is something we're working really hard on to make sure that it doesn't happen in our game, because like the sense of scale is perhaps like one of the most important things of the art style that we're going for. And we're using all sorts of tricks for that, but the key one among them is what we do is we model everything in meters, right? So everything we make, every model has an actual height to it, and it's a consistent size in the world. We don't mess anything up. So if a gun If a unit has a 30mm gun, then it's got a 30mm barrel size in the game. And if the whole unit itself is 10 meters wide and it's shooting at a building which is 80 meters wide, then that is the size. And when we put the trees in the game, there we look at actual tree species. So, you got your Douglas firs and your silver birches and things like that, and your Scots pines, and they're like some of them are 20 meters tall, some of them are 35 meters tall. We put the actual size in the game, and that's why the unit looks the correct size next to the trees, because they are the correct size. We don't stylize it, at all, basically. And that's I think that is actually the key. So our maps are measured in kilometers, our trees are measured in meters, and you have sort of the correct amount of trees for an actual forest on that map, and that's why we're working really hard on that. So I would say that no, we won't have scaling issues, because I'm talking about, because I've seen all the units, right? We haven't shown like all the units everywhere all at once, but you can just look at our footage where you do see the units next to the trees and things, and you can see that they do look like they're moving around this vast battlefield, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
even
that was
our
the other
biggest
thing
units.
with Planetary Annihilation, because it was like a sphere, they kind of had that problem, because you have like a planet, but it's tiny. We're doing flat maps, so we don't have that problem. We just, we have nice mountains and
Yeah,
hills
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I
but
think
is
that
there?
I think that like
Go on.
one of the big things with it is like I think the reason that Forged Alliance in particular I don't feel has this issue is they do have, I think they did a lot better with their scaling, even though it's wildly inaccurate. Like trees I think are the wrong size and everything is the wrong size compared to what you would read in the lore for the game. But with that game in particular, I feel like the maps are big and none of the units in the game, even on the smallest maps, feel like it's toys in a sandbox. And I think that having like a solid plan and having like solid measurements, like as you said with the meters and everything, will really help to curb that, because everything is you can envision how big that's supposed to be, and just get it just what you all want it to be.
Yeah,
Yeah, there were big
exactly.
decisions we made right at the start. One was the scaling, that happened straight away. The other one was like art style, like the saturation of all the effects and stuff. If you look at some other games, they really overdo all the projectiles. They're like this bright neon yellow pulsing dot. Or you can do it. Other games, they just like you can't even see the projectile. It's just a little trail because of the wind. Raised by the bullet or something. So we're definitely going down the second route there, which is more of a realistic and subdued style.
All right. So, we ready to move on to the next question?
Yep.
All right. So this one is in relation to one of the, I believe it's a stretch goal, for Sanctuary, and it is about the weather dynamics. If you haven't seen it yet, there will be a link in the description and maybe a card up in the top right that will take you to a video breaking down everything we know about Sanctuary so far that I made. And of course, Sanctuary is going to have dynamic weather, and you will even be able to affect it yourself theoretically if this goal is reached. And the question is, will the dynamic weather affect resource generation?
So the answer is maybe. That's one of the things we're looking at. So if you don't know about the weather mechanic, which we talked about this in our Brad Rebit interview, what was that? That was a few weeks ago now. Time does fly, right? But so one of the things you can do is you can actually like if the stretch goal is met, this is one of our bonus features, back Sanctuary Kickstarter will get it done. But if the stretch goal is met, you'll actually, because the whole weather system on the Dyson sphere is fully dynamic, right? If you do the maths and you make sure that the sphere is an accurate physical size, the whole Dyson sphere is, because we did the maths on that too. The previous question I said, we take scale seriously. We even scaled the sphere, right? But like if you do the maths, the inside of it is like 2,500 degrees. And what happens with any in a shell is the outside of it will become 2,500 degrees, which is not habitable, in case you didn't know. So the sphere, it has to have these actively cooled systems all the time. So in order to have trees on the sphere, it's fully artificial weather. And what that means is you can disrupt it, right? If you find a coolant pipe and you rupture the coolant pipe, and that map will literally get flooded in liquid nitrogen, right? And you'll be able to freeze the whole map. All the ships will get frozen in place, or the units will be able to cross the ice and so on. And that's something that we're aspiring for you to be able to do as a player, right? And it would be a per map setting. So some maps will have these structures and you'll be able to do it, and some maps wouldn't have these structures. We're exploring all these options. And the answer is we're thinking about having it affect resource generation. So for example, when it's cold, all energy generation on the map is boosted a little bit because the power stations get free cooling, right? And when it's hot, maybe we might be able to. We're messing around with options. So right now we got like freezing and normal, but maybe we'll have a hot environment as well. When it's hot, you'll get more alloys because it's easier to smelt them or something like that, right? So we're thinking about these things, and there might also be like weather storms, like a snowstorm, like because you just frozen the map. There's like an unnaturally strong blizzard, and all your aircraft will move slower, and your radar ranges will be reduced, and your vision radius will be reduced for everybody. So we're talking about these kind of global effects that might affect the way you play the game, and it can influence your strategy. You could say, oh, I'm going for the stealth game now. Let's whack the blizzard on, right? Now nobody can see anything, right? It's like interesting things you could do. So short answer is we're looking at it.
You could
Right.
also do faction-specific stuff. So, one faction gets a boost if it's cold, like the, chosen, because the, superconductor brains or whatever, they can think better, so or, whatever. Or maybe all laser units get penalized in hot weather, so they overheat more, so the firing rate goes down. So that's probably like interesting to do, because if you're losing in a certain way or they had heaps of laser units, you could say, well, I can just like heat the whole planet up, and then I'll turn that so it's not hurting me as bad. These are all interesting things to do. There was also that suggestion Guile had, when you shatter the ground and there's a big gaping hole in the shell and it's all like hot and there's heaps of like sunlight coming out. If planes flew over it, maybe they would take damage, or maybe they would just lift. Or Brad Reeb had the idea, I think, that air units could go faster when you could change the direction of the wind or something like that. So there's all these different ideas, and they're all cool. They're kind of new. They're kind of fresh. You can't really do that in RTS games at the moment. And I guess our philosophy is we just need to play it and see what it's like. So we don't have enough stuff yet to like make these decisions. We're still getting things going, but a bit later we'll start to explore these ideas, and then we'll see what's going in.
All
Yeah,
right.
for sure. Why commit to something when you might find a better thing? That's the whole
Yeah.
point.
The reason not to do it is basically balance, and the other reason would be like it's just unmanageable as a player. Like it ideas are cool, but it just might be too hard to think about. And like, let's be honest, these games are already super difficult.
Yeah, it's kind of like the vertical versus horizontal development in MMOs. Horizontal development usually leads to players, whenever they start, if they start when the game's new and fresh, it's really easy because there's not actually that many systems to learn. But as the horizontally developed MMOs get bigger, they find that it's much harder to keep a new player in the game because they'll log in for the first time, they'll start playing, and they'll be bombarded with 50, 60 new unique systems that all affect each other in different ways. And it can just be information overload, and that could be a bit too much. But I do like the idea that you all are going to try things out and just see how it plays and see if it plays in a fun way, and just make decisions
Just
based
add a
off that.
piece at a time and work out. We should just optimize for fun, basically, not just adding complexity because it sounded cool on paper.
All right.
Mm.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. The next question, of course, is
Just one more thing on that. One thing about our game is it has the large scale, so you control a lot of units. You're on a huge map and you're zoomed out, and because of that, it's difficult as a player right there. And if you add lots of nitty gritty and detail, that becomes very hard to manage. Having said that, we could release a second title using our same game engine, but it's not large scale. It's a smaller scale thing. You only have 40 units. Now we can do heaps of stuff. We could have mud and maybe legged units can walk through mud, but wheeled units can't walk through mud, or they walk really slow. You could have like, forest fires causing damage to units or providing cover. And you could have the weather affecting all those things. When you're on top of a cliff, your range gets higher. All these things. So really, like detail tactics rather than it being strategic. It's more tactical, and it's just about a tiny map with a tiny force and just like getting lots of like multipliers in. I think that would be really fun, and I wish I could play that game. If anybody knows a game that does all that, I want to play it. So let me know. But we can't really put all of those ideas into Sanctuary because it's just those at that scale. All that stuff's too hard for the player.
All right. Moving
Yeah.
on. Or Brett, do you have something else you wanted to add to
No, all good. Moving on.
that? Moving on to our next question. What is the planned maximum player count per match in Sanctuary?
Good question. So there's actually several answers here. As always, you don't expect an easy answer out of Brett. So there's the MVP answer, then there's a stretch goal answer, and then there's our technical theoretical answer. Right. So the MVP answer is we'll have 8 players on the match, and 4 versus 4, right? And then depending on how well the stretch goals go and how well we can optimize the game, and with this is a network question, right? So the reason why we're going for 8 players is because we've got a slightly different client server model, networking model compared to some other RTSs. Ours takes some similarity from Planetary Annihilation, and it kind of mixes it around, so we kind of got a little bit of a special system going on. And the more players there are, the more network requirements will be. So over time, as people get faster internet, faster upload speeds, this requirement will actually go up. So you'll actually be able to get more players in 10 years' time or whatever, right? But for now, we're aiming for 8 because it's actually pretty manageable. And with optimization, we could get that maybe up to 16 or whatever. But the technical, theoretical answer is, well, I think 64. But like at that point, it would be a completely crazy map. It would be a completely crazy thing. But that's sort of what our engine could support. Would not really that many projects. You just need maybe a server on the cloud with where you can rent it out for a game or something, right? You could have some crazy things where you make a special mod which adds a 64-player map. Why not? But what we're aiming for is 8 for the minimum viable product release, and then we'll be seeing how far we can push that and seeing if it works for large player maps, right?
And the game balance will be around 8, so it's sort of designed.
Yeah.
The maps will be for 8, all that sort of stuff. If we have more or less, it'll be like an afterthought to that. 8's the target number, like 4v4 maps. There are some super cool things we could do down the track, like well after launch, but you can do like a sort of smart network thing where instead of let's say there's 4 people on one team, instead of sending the data to all 4 people, you could just send it to one of them and he sends it to the other 3 on his team. And in that way you could support more and more people. Because see, the big limitation that we have is the upload speed of the player. Like most people, they don't have more than 10 megabits per second upload speed. That's the limitation of our game. It's not CPU. It used to be CPU. If you look at other games, they start lagging and slowing down because the processors can't handle it. But we've architected ours a certain way where that's not an issue. But what is an issue is just the upload speed. So that's what we're constantly optimizing for and having to get right. And like Brad said, the upload speed will get better over time. So that's a really interesting point because the internet will change. And we should keep that as an option. So like a modder can one day just like flick the switch and say, all right, let's have 64 players and let's imagine that. It'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. That's pretty cool. And I know that might be a bit of a bummer to some players who really like the 6v6 and 8v8. And man, my 32-player bar video did really well. So people do like seeing all those crazy players. But I think that everybody hates having network issues. And if you all are just focusing on getting a solid at least starting point and making sure that the game plays well and doesn't have issues with like upload speed or horrible lag, I think that's awesome. And with
There's
that,
heaps of things you can do with network issues as well. Like, another thing that would be really good is just rehosting the game at this point in time. So let's say, the host crashes or he leaves or whatever. Be good if just a player could say, save the game right now. Let's respin it up right now. It tries to put all the same people back in the places, but if somebody, isn't there anymore, you just substitute for another person and then you just keep playing. Like, I mean, the technology can do that. It's just it takes a lot of time to sort it out, but there's no technical reason why that can't be the case. It's just that people don't do it. You could also resume games midway through. Imagine like you're watching some replay of somebody else or your own replay, right? Or you're training and you just had a fight with somebody and they completely kicked your butt, right? Because you had 100 planes and they had 100 planes and you had a fight and they just whooped your butt. And then you could watch the replay, save it at a certain point, and redo that fight again and again and again. So, and you could replay famous battles and stuff. Like, there's lots of different things you can do. And this is all the stuff we think about when we're doing the architecture, is trying to make it so we can do those expansions later. We won't be able to do that straight away, but in this like really glorious future where we make heaps of money and we can expand the game out, we would definitely be looking at all those types of expansions.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's like some of the things that we talked about, that Nine just talked about. That's possible because of some decisions that we made. You can't just do this for any lockstep RTS game, for example. So, for example, StarCraft. In the tournaments, if a player crashes, you know what they do? They have to resimulate the whole game. That's what they do in the tournaments, and there's a several-minute delay while they're doing it. And that is a fundamental limitation that Blizzard with its Brazilian dollars couldn't solve. So that's like a consequence of the architecture. And actually, we're thinking that with the decisions we're making, we could actually enable that feature. And you could do people joining mid game. So you got a 6-player game, then bang, 2 more people join halfway through because a new
Yeah, what
player has
about
entered the
people?
battlefield, right?
Exactly. How good
I
would that
Yeah.
be?
a,
Somebody has to leave because they got to go to school or whatever, so they just jump out and someone else pops in.
Yeah, where's your month-long marathon match where people are just in shifts, right? Like, how long can you keep it going?
That's what Galactic War is. It's just one match, right? And that's it. It just goes for like 40 days straight.
I
Yeah.
I, I'm starting to see a common thread here with the I guess this would be engine side kind of stuff. You all seem really adamant about keeping things keeping as many options available to you as possible and not locking into one thing. You wanna be adaptable or flexible on a lot of things, and I really think that's a great plan.
Yeah,
No,
well, when we
definitely.
started this project, we had all these ideas of things that we could do, but we're limited by like time, we're limited by money. So we said, well, let's, design and think about these things, but we're only going to build that piece right there for now. So, the possibility is there. We had all sorts of ideas, like things that we never talked about. Like we were talking about tidal waves for a while. You could send a nuke into the ocean. It would make a tidal wave. It would come. It would smash your base, but it would also carry ships into your base. So you would have like a battleship, just like brought inland. But you could counter that by sending your own nuke in between your base and the tidal wave to make a counter tidal wave and send it back. Like, I mean, there were lots of things that we spoke about. That's one of the ideas that we decided not to do, but it sounds really cool. And then you could have like flowing lava, and then you could blow up a volcano to create a lava flow that goes straight into that base. Like, there's some cool things you can do.
Plus the dam. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Sanctuary too, man.
Yeah. All right. So we're moving on to the next question, and this is actually a little bit relevant to the other interview that I did with these two beautiful people here. Go check that out up here. But when you were on the promotions team, 9-2, you or the promotions counselor, I should say, for FAF, you really helped push the map generator, which has become a kind of staple of FAF. And this question is: will there be randomly generated maps, or maybe randomly generated terrain? Like you play a map and the terrain is just slightly different.
Yeah, I
Uh,
really don't know how much of MapGen's success had to do with me pushing it. I did try and push it, that's for sure, but it probably would have done just fine without me. I think the biggest, besides Neuroxus actually building it, the biggest thing that happened was Sheikah joining, and he really just leveled it up. But having said that, I'm a massive MapGen fan, absolutely massive. I think it's absolutely the best thing, so I'm a big fan. And we already have MapGen in Sanctuary because some of the community ported it to um, to Sanctuary. So I don't know if you know, but Ozone X made the map editor for FAF, and he made our map editor as well. And the formats are both widely known. Um, I don't know. No, I don't think they convert it from one to the other. I don't know how they do it. I think they just somebody took, and thank you, somebody. I forget who it was, so sorry about that. But you're awesome. Never forget it. Um, they took the FAF map generator, converted it to Sanctuary, and it already has generated maps for Sanctuary. It's not quite as polished, but it's on the way. And yeah, it was done with the full permission of the people who made MapGen in the first place. So even though it's an open source project and we don't need permission, we had permission. So, it's just really cool. I can totally see it having a place. We're concentrating on the core stuff at the moment, but, in the future, yeah, hell yeah. Let's do some MapGen. And you know what would be great? What would be really cool is if we could soup up MapGen, make it really cool, and then give it back to FAF. I would love that.
Yeah.
all right. So moving on to our next question. That one was a bit short. This one is gonna be a bit longer, I'm assuming, because it is: will the game have competitive and casual game modes separated? Such as, will there be a ladder to climb, or will it just be custom games?
So, as always, typical bread response. It depends. It's up to you. So what we're thinking is, like coming from all these other RTSs, every RTS it has a dozen ways to play it, right? So, you can have ladder. There's competitive things. There's skirmish. And then there's all these mod maps. MOBAs were invented because of a mod for Warcraft 3 or whatever, right? Like that was the whole thing, right? Like Dota is that, right? So there's always different ways to play an RTS. An RTS, like that's kind of the hallmark of RTS games, is that they're kind of like they're really engine heavy. They do a lot of simulation, so you can just do whatever you want in there, right? I've seen sort of adventure games and things in there, and there's crazy things going on, right? So um what we're thinking, and then again, it all depends on how successful we are. So again, the core game, right, is a kind of skirmish online thing, right, and then we're going to add things like ladder. We're going to add things like, and the core game is going to be custom games. It's going to be skirmish, and then we're going to add things like ladder. We're going to add things like matchmaking, like in pretty much every RTS game. You get your campaign, you get casual modes, you get special maps like Wave of Death style maps or survival style maps or tower defense maps.
Yeah,
We've got
I
a
think
lot
we
of
would have a
things.
survival very early on because that's
Yeah,
kind of handy for dev anyway. And let's like one person play by themselves quite well. The other
yeah,
one that
yeah,
you're missing is just like AI in general. So you play like a
yeah.
skirmish against an AI. So that'll come later. We've never promised AI at all, because we're making a multiplayer game, but we're probably going to have it. We have someone on the team who does AI. We're already doing AI, but we're not promising AI.
All
Yeah.
right.
AI is just a risky thing. Like you see the news about ChatGPT, they can't keep it in the box. Gonna escape and take over the world. And we're making an RTS AI. If we make it too smart, it's gonna use all its strategy, brain knowledge, 5,000 IQ. So who knows?
So you're just gonna use Chat GPT for your AI, is what I'm getting here.
Yeah. With ChatGPT, well, like there's news coming out every day. So 3 days ago, they released a plugin support for ChatGPT, where you make an API to call to it. So you could make an API where you call and it's like, "What's your next move?" And ChatGPT will say, "Send tanks to the north," and then it will pass that back and just stick it
I've
into the game as orders.
I have a feeling it would just start submitting memes back. It'd be like, It'd be like, drive me closer so I can hit them with my sword.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the next question. This is going to be edited out. I'm going to skip a couple of these because I think that some of them aren't honestly all that great questions, like the resource trading and how many resources there will be. I'm pretty sure most people who have pretty much any idea about the project will know that those two answers. So let's get to some more interesting ones. All right, so our next question is, will dynamic weather pose a threat to armies, i.e. a thunderstorm, having random lightning strikes that can hurt units?
Yeah, so this is a similar question to the previous weather question where we touched a little bit on that, maybe a little bit. We talked about resources, but yeah, so that's another one of the things that we're thinking about is that, maybe there would be some weather, so, and you would be able to even take damage, but, you've got to be careful with that because it may be quite unsatisfying to, you're playing the game and then all your units die because of a super thunderstorm, so you've got to be careful with that. But there could be a thing where, you blow up a shield, like a planetary scale shield generator, and it was protecting you from a monstrous blizzard because there's some kind of the weather systems on a Dyson sphere, they could be way more powerful than those on Earth. Not only are they artificial, but also they're just bigger. So you could get your 300-mile-an-hour winds, right? And we're thinking about like exotic kind of weathers as well. So not all of the Dyson sphere is a perfect replica of the stuff on Earth. You could have just giant like areas which are just full of crates or like artificial things, and one of those could just be a glass storage zone. So you'd get fiberglass sandstorms, but they're not sandstorms. They're made out of little glass shards, and they'll like cut your tanks, right? And things like that. So that is one of the things we're thinking about testing, right? And it would be like a global effect, and then you might need to hide under your shields and so on, right? When it happens. Yeah, and that is one of the things we're testing, but we don't know yet. It's up in the air.
Yeah,
We haven't
those
committed to
are
things.
things that are hard for the player, but I guess they're good for the campaign, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that wraps it for this interview with 9-2 and Special Bread. Is there anything you all want to say to the people before this video ends?
I guess just thank you everybody for all your support. We've had a lot of good feedback from the community. We've had our investors, our Patreon, our volunteers, and like just from everybody involved in the project. It's just we couldn't have made it here without you. It's been great because of you, and thank you very much for all of that and riding this way with us. Please come on to our Discord, and if you are interested about any of these ideas, you want to talk about them, or you got your own ideas, like maybe make a forum thread about it or something, and let's just get the conversation going.
All right, Brett,
Brett?
anything?
Oh well, if you're an investor, reach out to us. We will have a good conversation. I mean, come on now, we got to plug them. Our current investors have been incredible, and if you want to be incredible too, talk to us. That's it. Thank you very much, and
All
thanks
right.
for your continued support. Actually,
Thank you all for your time. I know you all are very busy, and I'll let you go. Have a wonderful day or night.
Thanks, Willow. See you later.